Dr. Bechara Seb on the line, who will be sharing with us the real-world data from policyholders using clinical validated digital therapeutic for stress resilience. So it's a sharing that focuses on the loss of life and loss of life quality of life attributable to mental illness, especially with lockdown and lack of social interaction, I guess. So Dr. Betra Seb is the CEO and Chief Scientist at Mobile Interactive, which is a digital therapeutics company that develops and commercializes clinically validated software to enhance human performance and to prevent, measure, and treat mental illness. He was a former principal investigator of neuroscience at Zurich Psychiatric Hospital. And Dr. Seb has published over 30 peer-reviewed scientific papers with the research expertise in understanding neural circuits and neurotransmitter systems. This includes how curiosity is linked to learning efficiency, meditation, stress, and overall mental health and performance. So, Dr. Seb, if you're on the line, maybe I'll pass the time over to you.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
I need permissions to turn on my video, I think.
Oh. Let me try to get whether the committee can help.
Great. And it's looks like it's working.
Yes.
Hello? Great.
Hello.
And I can share my screen here in order to have the slides. So Kyle, thank you very much for the introduction. It's very much a pleasure to be speaking. And yeah, we're going to dive into some data from a pilot that we ran with the health insurer recently. But before we get into that, I'd like to really back up and look at the big picture. And that's really what I consider to be humanity's greatest crisis right now, which is the struggle that we have with mental illness all around the world. And not only is it extremely expensive, upwards of $16 trillion per year, and the largest cause of disability, the quantity of loss of life and loss of life quality compared to all diseases that is attributable to mental illness has been steadily increasing for many decades. And the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated this dramatically. And this has really turned the world's attention to mental health in a very, very fresh and almost an alarming way. And what I'd like to mention is that this is very much unneeded suffering. There's a lot that we can do that is not yet being done through new technology. It's also worth mentioning that Singapore is really no exception here. In general, Asian countries are rather famous for still stigmatizing mental illnesses, but that doesn't mean that the mental illnesses don't exist. And the stigma is actually eroding quite quickly. And so this is very much a global issue, and it needs to be dealt with. And I'd like to highlight some of the things that we know already about mental illness. We know that the problem is very big. This is a huge problem and affects lots of individuals. The current standards of care are not enough. This is a no. What we're doing right now is not enough to actually deal with the problem. We know that ultimately every single person is affected, either directly or indirectly. And another thing that we know, which is not spoken about as much, is that everyone is affected in a very unique way. And that's a basis of the fact that we all have unique brains, and the way that we interact with the world is unique, and the effect that the world has on us and the way that we respond to treatments is all very unique. And because of all these things that we know, we can also understand that for mental illness, the solution really needs to be both scalable in order to deal with the size of the problem, as well as personalized in order to deliver something which is going to be efficacious for each specific individual. And the two primary care methods at present fail in either one of these regards. So psychotherapy is not scalable. We'll never be in a situation where we will have enough psychiatrists or some clinical psychologists and counselors and care workers in order to deal with the demand that exists inside of mental illness. And on the flip side, pharmacotherapy, which is quite scalable, even if it's expensive, it is scalable to a large extent. It is not personalized. And personalizing pharmacotherapy, that becomes prohibitively expensive to the point where it is no longer scalable. So these current solutions that we use to address mental illness cannot meet the demand of this crisis. Something new needs to be developed. And so what we are doing through digital therapeutics at Mobile Interactive is achieving scalability through mobile software. Almost everybody on the planet now has a smartphone, even in lower and middle income countries. And so we're putting together the infrastructure for healthcare providers to give patients access to digital therapeutics. And then because of that specific access, the digital therapeutic opens already understanding a little bit about the patient, what indication is important for them. And then they can go along on a personalized journey with clinically validated interventions that are specific for them. So very scalable solution. Personalization is achieved via the same platform, but through a gamified measure, treat, measure system, whereby the patients do a measurement before they undergo a therapy session, and then they do a measurement afterwards. And these measurements that we do are both subjective as well as objective. And through this, we're able to build up an understanding of what types of therapy and what types of circumstances have been most efficacious for each individual, and continue to iterate accordingly so that we know that we're delivering the most effective treatment possible. What this scalable system with objective measures and assessments has allowed us to do is build up a very, very interesting data set. And so because the vast majority of the content we've delivered so far has trained individuals on different forms of meditative techniques that allow them to be more in tune with their body, understand what stress is, the stress response, what emotions are, how to monitor their thoughts. Because of this training that's inherent to the intervention that we deliver to people across a variety of different indications, the ability for this population within our data set to provide back subjective readings of stress and mood is much higher than for an average sample of the population. So we have this enriched data set of accurate self-assessments. And these self-assessments have been done in tandem with 30-second selfie videos. And from these 30-second selfie videos, we're able to extract out a whole host of digital biomarkers. Now I have over close to 2.5 million digital biomarkers from over 25,000 unique individuals and 175 nations represented in this data set. We have a global data set with accurate measures, self-assessments of stress and mood that have then been done in tandem with 30-second selfie videos. What this has allowed us to do is build up an accurate neural network that can quantify brain states. We've already demonstrated the ability to objectively quantify an individual's stress based upon the information that we extract out from the face. For stress, it turns out that all we need is measurement of the blood flow through the arteries. This gives us heart rate variability, and with some statistical tricks, we're able to then deliver data into the neural network, and the neural network can then objectively identify stress without even having to have seen that particular patient before. Even on the first assessment, we were already achieving accuracy 80% or higher. And to our knowledge, this is the most accurate assessment from stress that can be obtained through a 30-second video from a front-facing camera on a smartphone. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are developing interventions for a variety of different indications. And already we have clinical validation for treating generalized anxiety, chronic stress, and mental illness comorbidities inside of cancer patients. And some of the data from our both published as well as unpublished studies are represented here. So you can see that after a 4-week intervention of the digital therapeutic for patients with anxiety, we see this reduction in the PROMIS anxiety subscale, the standards for measuring anxiety in patients. And the great thing to realize is that even though the intervention itself only lasts 4 weeks, there's only recommended to be 4 weeks, we do the first assessment at 3 months afterwards. We notice that there's this decrease in their anxiety. We look 6 months afterwards, and it persists. And this is indicating some staying power, the long-term effect of the intervention within this clinical trial. In terms of chronic stress, the data that are being shown here are demonstrating how we can measure state effects. These are measured through the product itself, not through a medical questionnaire, but rather through measurements of stress that are embedded inside of the product. And that allows us to get measurements on a daily basis. And so we can see what happens to the patients over time. And then this difference from the blue line here down to the green line is really that pre-post effect that we see from them engaging in a single piece of digital therapy. And we see similar data here in cancer patients, where fear of cancer recurrence is actually one of the main symptoms or main tells of the mental well-being of cancer patients, because the whole disease progression is rather stressful. But even after recovery, there's a lot of anxiety associated with the possibility of having the cancer reemerge. And so we've been able to really decrease that fear, the associated anxiety, as well as stress and other symptoms associated with mental illness in cancer patients using curriculum, which is very specific for them, as well as giving them access to the general tools inside of the platform. We have a broader indication pipeline at present. We're very interested in pediatrics because we have found that adolescents, teenagers respond extremely well to the digital intervention. And we are pursuing pediatric traumatic brain injury, so concussion in kids. I've already started a clinical trial there. In this clinical trial, we're also completing fMRI experiments, which will hopefully allow us to identify a mode of action through which we are able to support brain healing via, via the digital therapy. Excuse me. And we have many clinical partners throughout the world running trials in Canada, the United States, Brazil, as well as Singapore. And we're interested in bringing much more of our clinical investigations into Asia because we see a very, very wide open and eager market in terms of digital therapeutics. Excuse me. At present, there are over 10 million lives that are either fully or partially covered and therefore get access to our digital therapeutic. And all of the partners that we work with, whether that's in pharma or in healthcare providers or with insurance, are really partners that can help us along all the key steps towards establishing market access for digital therapeutics. It is still something of a new class of medicine, and not all of the kinks and all the infrastructural elements even have really been worked out. And so we're very eager to continue to work with various different partners in order to make this an integrated and meaningful part of the healthcare economy. And now I'd like to dive into some of the work that we've been doing with a major payer that has a few million policyholders. And they came to us with some data that I can share here that has demonstrated that the average cost per claim for psychotherapy has been increasing a little bit over the years, but the quantity of these claims has really been going up quite a bit. And we know that 2020 is roughly double the size of 2017, and 2021 will blow 2020 out of the water. And so this is a very serious concern for the payers, and they need to find more cost-effective solutions and get into the business of delivering preventative medicine in order to reduce the overall cost of healthcare for their plan members. So one of the first items that we look at when we start to engage with a broad population like this, and what are the types of content that these individuals want to engage with. And we see here that most of the most common or the most popular out of all the content categories was the beginner stage. So this indicates that a lot of the individuals that we're bringing onto the digital platform are people that don't have experience in these contemplative techniques for stress resilience and stress reduction. And it's a good sign because we're not just preaching to the choir. We're able to actually bring new people into the conversation. In this case, the conversation of preventative medicine for mental illnesses. And then we can start to look at, well, what are the actual effects that we see on these plan members as they engage with the content? And a nice way to represent an individual's mood is to do these mood words. These are the mood words with the sizes that correspond to the frequency delivered by the plan members before and after engaging in content. And you see some interesting patterns here. You see the word fatigued even, becoming much smaller. The word content becoming much higher. The word at ease becoming much larger. So there's a very, very clear trend to feeling better after engaging in content. And we have a way to pull out an implicit measure of mood through these data. And it corresponds to roughly an 8% improvement in mood. May not seem like a lot, but that's not bad for what turns out to be an average of 10 to 20 minute session. And then over the course of time, we see these long-term improvements. Of course, we also have the ability to look at the stress of these individuals and the self-assessment in stress that individuals indicate for us. We see this 19% decrease in their stress levels. Now, much of this is due to a placebo effect or the fact that they're feeling more relaxed afterwards. When we look at the objective measure of stress, and this is a true readout of what's happening in their nervous system, we see a 4% decrease in stress. This is a 4% change in the balance of the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems within the autonomic nervous system. This is extremely exciting that we're able to pick out even something like this. But it's a verification of the power of the intervention that we deliver and its objectives. There's no bias in here whatsoever in terms of how the individuals respond to content. Now, the great question comes up, well, how does this affect claims? What is the outcome for the health insurer? And to be frank, we are still very much looking into these data, and it will take some time to parse it because there are many confounds. This isn't a simple analysis. We don't have a special control group which we can do comparisons. Pre-post analyses will take years to complete properly. And so this is an ongoing analysis, and we're continually working with more payers in different areas of the world in order to do this type of work. But we have our theories. I mean, we do think that this has the potential to drive down claims overall and to make healthcare within mental illness much more efficient and therefore much more accessible to people all around the world. Now, I want to close things down and give lots of opportunity for discussion. But before I do, I want to circle back to something that I mentioned at the beginning, with mental illness being very much a crisis, a global crisis, the humanity's greatest crisis. And just to point out that where there is great crisis, there is also great opportunity. And without being too somber, I'd like to maybe draw attention to some tragic events that happened in July in Singapore that have really shaken people up and made people realize we have to take mental illness very seriously. And that is now finally happening in a very meaningful way. and the Health Promotion Board has new initiatives which are coming up, and we look forward to working with them. And the capacity to really tackle this problem is here with us, and we see that. And this is the situation where we want to be in, where everybody can be like this clinical trial patient here who was in one of our studies, and reports back after the study was finished. I was able to control my anxiety. I have worked with therapists. I have used numerous apps. This is the first thing that really clicked with me. And that's truly our goal, is to be able to click with people, to deliver something which is personalized and meaningful and effective, easy to access. This is all possible through the digital delivery of therapy, and because it scales and because it can be measured in real time. And we're very excited to be working with many different partners throughout the industry. And with that, I'd really like to take any questions individuals might have, maybe about the technology, how it works, other data that might be available, that I might be able to share.
Thank you, Dr. Seth. All right, we have our first question on how much will this digital therapeutic test kit cost, and how scalable is it to be included as part of the health insurance plan?
That's interesting. How much will it cost? I mean, in many ways, that's to be negotiated still with the. I can shut down my share here for now. The price points will depend upon the intervention and the indication. The general wellness preventative medicine side is very low cost, and so we have a bulk discounts for the insurers, and they come in much lower than what we would charge on the consumer side. So it's extremely affordable. ERP type of rates. When it comes to reimbursement for digital therapeutic interventions for specific interventions, for example, a child with a brain injury, and we know we have the data and we've run multiple clinical trials, then the price points come in much higher, but the value is also much higher, I think, for the not just the patient, but for the payer as well. Yeah. There's also a very big difference in the cost that it takes us to bring this to market, because in the case of medical interventions, we need to go through the entire regulatory process. So that demands more rigorous clinical trials. It demands clinical trials that compare against this current standard of care. And of course, there's all the paperwork associated with regulatory approval in various markets.
I see. Okay. So I guess there's one question on whether we are able to get patient level data from the app for our own analysis, or would it be very in technical terms that's alien to users?
We have I mean, the quick answer is absolutely yes. We have made a policy inside of the company very early on that we adhere to, where we do not monetize the data directly in any way. But we do share the data, and we do have permission from our users to share the data with key stakeholders. We have not built a physician dashboard in order for physicians to get access and look at the data, because we've spoken with the physicians and they don't want another dashboard. What they need is something that integrates with their current electronic medical record systems. And so that's what we're building up now, is the integration, the underlying back-end framework. And we've done that now with some of the with the insurers. So we're actually able to just completely on the back end link and identify which policyholder this is, and then we can examine the data together.
Right. So currently these are offered through insurers, and will it eventually be offered direct to consumers? Or do you? Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, we do have. I mean, we do have a direct to consumer venue through the general app stores. along with another 350,000 health apps. The going through insurers is really a benefit because it's a very, it's a good channel to go through. The plan members, don't always listen to their insurers, but they certainly do trust them to some extent, right? They are paying them. So it's a good channel from that perspective. The interventional content that, for example, would only be prescribed to individuals post-cancer diagnosis or with a brain injury or people with major depression, that will probably require a prescription from a physician or some type of licensed healthcare provider, and to provide that recommendation. And we think that that's important for maintaining the quality and for ethically delivering medicine, because we have to keep close track of these patients. There may be tendencies towards suicide that we need to monitor, and so there is an additional level of clinical assessment, which is done by people in those contexts.
Yeah, and right. So we have the next question on how do you scale psychotherapy via the mobile app? I would imagine that.
Right. So psychotherapy can be used, to describe many different things. Very often people think of psychotherapy as psychoanalysis, which is this very interactive conversation that a psychiatrist will have with a patient. But when I say psychotherapy in this context, we're describing any type of therapy which has an effect on the psyche. So essentially, so it's mental health therapy, we could say, just abbreviated to psychotherapy in this context. Primarily, what we have delivered has been based upon mindfulness manualized courses, and so mindfulness has turned out to be, when delivered properly through these courses, be more effective than CBT and DBT, at least for affect disorders. Now, there's something of a stigmatism against meditation and mindfulness that goes back many years, and it's also, I think, been now popularized to such an extent that people don't really consider it to be a medical practice. But there is a big difference between a medical grade meditation course and your mindfulness training that you get from a run-of-the-mill app from the App Store. Yeah. We also have music therapy, and we will be introducing self-hypnosis in 2022, and probably some CBT or DBT also next year. But we'll deliver anything we possibly can. And essentially what we do is we develop the intervention with clinicians and physicians and researchers and patients, and then we produce the material in recording studios with experts, clinical psychologists or mindfulness guides or counselors. We have that recorded material, and then we run a feasibility early phase 1 assessment with patients. We get that feedback, we do a second iteration. That's what we then take into a clinical trial. And then following that clinical trial, if we demonstrate efficacy, that's then the content that we publish.
Right. Okay. There's one last question on two more. One of it is coming from a more insurance angle, in the sense that would you foresee anti-selection risk for those with higher mental stress to have a higher propensity to purchase insurance products covering mental conditions?
Well, I don't know if I'm qualified to answer. Self-selection is always a concern when we run our clinical trials. That's for sure. One thing I can mention, though, is some exciting work that we're doing in China. China has a very sort of open private insurance market right now, where still only a small portion of the population is insured, and it's growing very rapidly. And they're reinventing sort of the whole model in some contexts. And what we're developing now are indication-specific insurance products. So rather than going in and saying, okay, what diseases are you likely to have? You go in and you say, we know you have this disease. We're insuring you for that disease. So you can profile somebody, you can identify, okay, you have asthma, and so we're going to deliver you an insurance product for asthma. And it includes a lot of the preventative things that can assist with the disease so it doesn't get worse. No reason why that can't exist also in the context of mental illness. Yeah.
I see. So that would be quite an innovative product.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for mental illness, it typically requires a rather long treatment time. So has the experience shown that patients are having discipline in continuing their treatment on the app? Yeah.
Yes, I mean, so if you remember from the slide I showed where I put some graphs pulled out from our clinical studies, the intervention, prescribed is this 4-week, course that has step-by-step exercises that are conducted, psychoeducation plus meditative practices, plus journaling and other sort of interactive tools. That being said, the vast majority of the patients continue to use the product because our full library of content is over 1,000 different sessions in 6 different languages. So there's a rich, deep experience and there's multiple activities that can be done. So people stay with it, but they often, they'll repeat some of the stuff over again, but they'll often then go out and start exploring other aspects that are available. And that's one of the main reasons why we've decided to create a platform through which we can deliver interventional content, because then regardless of what specific interventional material you're receiving, it's all done within the context of this more general resilience boosting ecosystem that contains also these pre-post assessment measures. So the answer is, do they have the discipline? I mean, they stick on if they need it. We have patients that have been using the product on a near daily basis for close to 4 years now. And obviously that's not the majority, but that is a significant enough portion. However, the intervention is designed to be, to let the patient become independent at some point. Right? We do want to cure people, right? And part of that is giving them the capacity to evoke these types of practices on their own without needing to resort to the product. And we notice very, very interesting things in the data for the people that have used it for a long time. So the real world data analysis shows very robustly that we're able to decrease people's stress over the first 20 therapy sessions that they go in. In addition, the drop that they have, so the effectiveness of each session goes up. Now, that trend of the effectiveness of each session starts to plateau at some point. You start to hit a ceiling. But what's really interesting is the stress level, the pre-stress level starts to increase. And what that's telling us is not that people are becoming more stressed, but that they're becoming more independent of the product and they come back to it when they have extremely stressful events in their lives. And so it starts to shift in how they use it. At first, it's really a tool to teach them the basics and how to get through things. And then afterwards, it's more like a friend or like a shoulder to cry on. That type of, so the relationship with the product changes over time. And that's partly what helps it, I think, have some sort of staying power. It reduces the fatigue. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, thanks for the sharing. Yeah, it's really interesting how the app, like you said, it becomes a friend or a shoulder to cry on. Yeah, I guess we do not have any further questions. So thank you very much for the sharing today. And I understand that you had to wake up really early because of the time zone differences this morning,
No
right?
problem. I'm used to it.
Yeah. So I do believe that a lot of attendees has benefited from your sharing. And we do encourage that if they have any questions, I'm sure you'll be happy to let them reach out to you.
Of course, absolutely. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. I publish articles on Medium, and you can just send me an email as well.
Yeah. Thanks so much for the sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you.